Hey everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, and in today's video I have a ranking up guide for y'all in Wizard101. Now, I have been rank 1 multiple times on multiple schools, and I decided to make this video honestly because I'm not doing a whole lot of PvP right now, at least not until the balance update. But I still wanted to help you guys and help the community as a whole, even though I'm kind of taking a step back from content creation right now. If you are a more loyal viewer of the channel, you probably noticed I haven't been streaming, haven't really been uploading a whole lot lately, and that's simply because I just don't enjoy the meta right now. However, these things I am going to share with you in the video. Doesn't really matter pretty much on the context of the meta and whatnot. These are just really good principles to have in any meta in PvP. And these are some things I've personally learned along the way, and I didn't really have anybody to teach me this when I was learning PvP, you know. And I did talk to some other high-rank people in the community as well to get their opinions on what I should and should not add in this list. So the first tip I have for y'all is you're going to want to utilize your deck space. Now, I'm going to show you guys a couple of my decks that I ran on multiple schools. If you're in my Discord, by the way, you can see all my decks. They're posted there just in advance or in the future, whatnot, and like the meta setups I use, by the way. So shout out to my Discord, link in description. I'm actually going to hop on a better school that's not Storm, because Storm decks are kind of like an anomaly. Storm's just kind of in a weird spot right now in the state of the game. So yeah, we're on the fire. This is my personal favorite school, the Hue, right now in the game. Now, my fire strat is kind of weird. This is the deck I run right now on my fire current present day. So the way my deck works and whatnot, it's very dot heavy. So what I like to do is I like to blade a decent bit and then send a dot into a bull. And this works really good against like schools like Balance and whatnot, because they cannot get the pips to counter your blades and also like remove your dots in a way. And if they do get the pips to counter your blades, then you can just take a hit like an Art or a Elephant and be fine. This strat, personally, in the past like 2 or 3 seasons, I've maybe lost like 4 balances out of 30 on my fire. Very good strats. And generally with this deck, at least with how I play, I have a very good chance, as in I'm likely to win against the 6 other schools that are not Storm. Storm, obviously, on a fire is the worst matchup in the game. Probably either the worst matchup in the whole game or the second worst matchup in the whole game. You know what I mean? So it's pretty bad, and there's not really any way you can fix that matchup. Like, you can't really swap your dual school or play differently. It's just kind of one of those gimmicks in the game where the interactions are so broken, the fire can't do anything to win. But, you know, it's good that you recognize that and you double down on your strat, because like I said, it's allowed me to win against the 6 other schools pretty consistently and whatnot. So what is in my deck then that makes it work so well? Well, blades are always generally pretty good, and the schools like counter blades, aka death or ice, you simply can just play around the counters. So for example, an ice is going to wyvern your blades. Okay, just blade again, or shield to cover the trap, then blade again. And the reason that works so well is because you're forcing the ice to stress out their deck and discard things they're probably not going to want to lose, like Winter Moon, Brace, Bubble, Toilet. And with Death, at least, Death's blade counters are like 8 pips, so generally you can play around, like, okay, if I blade and I take an open dragon, I can just blade again, then overtime bull, now they have no pips, stuff like that. Which actually is another point I should add to the list here, which I didn't even have on the list, by the way, but you want to play around the counters. No matter the matchup, no matter what scenario you're in, you have to learn that you're going to get countered and play around it. This is the side deck I run right now, so my side deck is basically full of utilities, like, you know, burst hits, blade removal, 0 pip moves to pull forward that are always generally a pretty good move, like a weakness or a tower, maybe a blade, and then I run my king arts and my rain inside, so they're pretty accessible to pull against the ice and death matchups. So essentially what you're going to see here on my deck is I have a very linear but good strategy, right? And you play around the counters, and you just realize you're gonna lose to a storm, because even if you set for it, you're gonna lose anyways, right? The only way you beat a storm is if they get extremely unlucky, or they're extremely bad, right? And either way, that is not in your control. So there's nothing to learn there as the fire on your end. So yeah, to summarize the point one here, we have a plan for how we are going to play pretty much in every matchup, the 6 matchups except Storm. And we are utilizing our deck space. We have a lot of, we have blades, we have shields, weaknesses, and we're packing a lot of the spells we want to pull. So like Surge, Fireblade, Towers, and some of the more niche things like King Art Rain, or Immolate, or like Snowman, or just a Frost Giant. Only pack 1 copy of those. They're good to have. You don't really need a whole lot of them. Now that leads us into my next point here actually in the video, y'all. So the reason you're not going to want to have a whole lot of copies of these spells simply is because it is going to hinder you. And this is a very common mistake you see in low rank players, which is partly why I get really pissed off when I queue them on stream. But if you overset your deck too much for one thing, you're going to end up losing other matchups. So for example, right, imagine I'm on a fire, okay, I'm really weak against, I don't know, like dots or heals, right? Like, let's say dots, right? Okay, yeah, I could pack like 4 Stormzilla, 4 Leviathan in main deck, and Leviathan inside, and I'm never gonna lose to dot spam, right? But the issue is, against the other schools that aren't related to dots, or if they don't dot you, I'm gonna have a harder time pulling for what I need, and chances are I'm gonna deck fill more against other, utilities hanging effects, like maybe Blade Stack and whatnot. Because I'm gonna have a harder time just playing the game and fetting my opponent and cycling for what I need like normally, because I have all these extra counters that I don't need. That's why you want to have generally a healthy balance in your deck between the copies and whatnot. For example, like Jading is really OP right now, right? So I have 2 Storm Arts, which is pretty useful against Jades, and obviously Ice and Death countering Tourette. And then I have Reshuffle with Nax, Tritons, and main deck, right? So I basically have 6 heal counters, and if I shuffle, I will have 10. Compare this to something a little more situational, like Frost Giants or Evil Snowman, right? Like, yeah, they're decent sometimes, but like I don't need to have like 6 of these, right? It's more niche. You need to understand the purpose of your counters and how often they're going to be used. And I really can't stress this enough. The amount of people I see just overly set for things, it really ultimately drags down their win rates. And if you really think about it, like think about it this way, right? How many schools can heal effectively right now? Storm and Life, right? Yes, Jading is annoying and whatnot, right? But that's only 2 schools, right? If you set your whole deck just for those 2 schools, there's 5 other schools that you're gonna get, and you're gonna have a disadvantage against, right? Point number 4, cycling slow and not cycling on your off turn. Now, I've done, obviously, a fair share of Wiz coaching. Again, shameless plug in the description if you are interested in that. But one thing I've noticed is people tend to be very lazy on their off turn, and I'm not sure if that's because like old Wiz, where like, you couldn't actually do that and get value, but now with like turn-based and whatnot, it's actually very important to cycle on your off turn. You might think it's not that big of a deal, but trust me, it's a very big deal, and the one thing you have control of in Wiz is your cycling. So instead of being lazy and just, looking at absolutely nothing, you should be focused on cycling your hand and pulling for what you need and planning what is going to happen next. In general, cycling faster will also make you click faster, and if you click faster, that will mean your opponent has more time to deck fill. So more often than not, what you'll see with, high rank players and whatnot, if they stream or whatever, you'll tend to see that they discard very fast, and that's simply because they already have their next couple of moves planned out in their head while they're looking at the spell animation. Okay, point number 5, do not spam draw round 1. Sometimes there are matchups where you don't even need the TC to win. So an example I have here is, let's take Storm versus Fire, right? You can easily gas a Fire on your Storm without even touching your side deck. Now, obviously this does not apply to every matchup and whatnot, and it's much easier to do if it's like a counter matchup, but you want to be very selective with what you're drawing and if you're cycling main or side deck, right? So you should be asking yourself, okay, do I need to be cycling main or side deck right now? And it's not sitting there just doing absolutely nothing. For example, right, let's take a Storm Mirror. That's another example we could use. You're primarily going to want to play off your main deck like 90% of the time with Wands, pulling Catch, Steel Pip, and you're really only going to cycle side deck for like Galvanic. If you just randomly spam draw inside on round 1, and you're not cycling for your Steel Pips and your Catch of the Days, which are your two best moves, round 1 and 2, you're kind of just hurting yourself, right? So just be a little more cautious on what you are discarding and whatnot. Next up, we have listen to your deck and memorize how many copies you've pulled and how many you pack. So this is something I learned more recently, probably the past like year or two, I want to say, but essentially, let's say I'm packing 6 Catch of the Days on my Storm. That's what most people do, right? Now, if I pull 3 or 4 Catch of the Days, my first, I don't know, like 20 cards, let's say, right? I'm gonna have to hold on to 1 or 2, right? Use one and then keep another in case they counter the blades, right? I physically cannot hold on to them all, right? But I have to realize, right, in the middle of the game or the late game, I'm probably not going to see that Catch today for a long time because numerically speaking, the odds that I pull the other 2 Catch of the Days in my deck is really low. But for example, right, let's say you pack like max heal counters or something, right, and like you're halfway through your deck and you're cycling pretty well, right? That should be the next thing to come up in your deck, logically speaking. And you can see this a lot on my stream as well, right? Like I tend to predict what I'm about to get with my deck, and I mean, of course you're not always right because there's RNG involved and whatnot, right? Like I've had times where I haven't pulled any of my Catch of the Days, like all 6 of my Catch of the Days were within the last 14 spells in my deck, right? And you can only cycle 7 cards a hand, right? And if the match only lasts 5 rounds, it's physically impossible for me to win that matchup if I don't pull what I need, right? So sometimes RNG is just gonna absolutely screw you and you can't win. But most of the time, logically speaking as well, if you pay attention, you can get, good at predicting your deck and whatnot. Next up, we have learn how to pace your cycling depending on the matchup. Experience is usually the best teacher for this one, or just watching streamers in general, y'all. So what I mean by this is essentially, let's say my Storm, right, in a mirror or something, right? You're going to be cycling 6 spells and then using 1, or, cycling 5, using 1, and then keeping the next one for the next round, right? You need to play very quick in that matchup because it only lasts a couple of rounds, right? However, a matchup like Ice or Life, right, you kind of tend to need to cycle slower, which is kind of annoying because obviously you want to have the best move all the time, but if you cycle too much, you risk deck failing, and if you deck fail anyways, then you're not going to have the spells to actually kill your opponent, and you have to reshuffle, then you're giving up tempo and whatnot. So yes, you need to be very, very careful with the matchups and whatnot. If it's a slower matchup, you need to be very selective with what you're discarding, but generally in the quicker ones, there's usually only like 3 to 4 moves that happens. Like if I'm a Storm against a Myth, all I need is Catch, an Elf or a Elephant, Impair, and like Galvanic or Trap Auras, right? That's it. However, if I'm against a Life, I need to keep my Tritons, I need to keep my Impairs, I might need a Shield, I might need a heal, I might need the Catch, I might want to, Queen, a dot counter. There's just so much more crap going on, right? So it's a lot harder to cycle. And like I said, this is generally a skill that is just going to take you some time to get used to and whatnot. Personally, me, I'm very good at the quicker matchups. That's just because I main Storm usually, though. right? And even with the slower ones, I'm still trying to figure them out to this day. I've gotten a lot better, and obviously I win most of the time, but that doesn't mean there's not room for improvement still, right? And the last thing I have here is you're always going to want to assume the most optimal play, or the worst case scenario is how I think about it, you know? So it's kind of, I don't know, this one that just kind of gives me anxiety in a sense, I feel like. Because it's like you gotta worry about what they're gonna do, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, what would I do if I were them? So at least for someone who has anxiety problems like me, it's kind of like a detriment in a way. I shouldn't have anxiety playing the game. However, it does kind of help me out with, you know, figuring out what I would do. So next time you're, you know, in a match and you're in a situation, think of like, okay, if I were them, like what would be the 2 best moves I could do in their scenario with the information I have. It's very important to assume the most optimal play, because that will force you to make better moves, and that will naturally also rank you up. Anyways, that's everything I got for the video today, y'all. Let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comments. If there's anything I missed or you have any questions, feel free to let me know down there. I will always get back to them to the best of my ability, of course. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a like and a sub if you are new. If not, that is okay. I appreciate you watching this far in. Hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for being here. Take care and goodbye.